GSBA members, thank you for allowing me to spend a few minutes this afternoon to share my candidacy. My name is Bruce Harrell, and I'm running for mayor. I hope that I'm familiar to many of you because you all have been warm supporters of mine, and hopefully I've been supporters of yours to your satisfaction. I'm heavily involved in small business support, heavily involved in the LGBTQ community. You will see on my endorsement page, I proudly display LGBTQ leaders and members. And I always jokingly say, hey, everyone doesn't have to be a leader. If you want to endorse me, just endorse me and I'll proudly display it. And I say that to say this, that I'm running for mayor because that's what my candidacy is all about. I have a pretty strong vision on what good public safety looks like, what good race and social justice work looks like, defeating discrimination, a track record, what small business revitalization looks like. But I don't have all the answers. And my leadership style is one in which I do a lot of homework. I'm a voracious reader, and I try to read everything I can in this country to see what's working. And then I rely on people who I respect, I trust. And I trust them to not only lead with integrity, but lead with sharp, smart answers. And so that's what my administration is going to look like. So we have a plan for business revitalization that will involve sort of new business-to-business relationships in our Office of Economic Development. We will look at what we found out through COVID, the lessons we learned when government can sort of get out the way and loosen the regulatory structure to allow businesses to shine and become revitalized. I've been doing small business tours throughout the entire city, talking to them about what they've perceived in the last years as impediments to their success. I'm not afraid to use tax revenues to get things done, but I also believe that before we impose any tax, whether it's a sales tax or a property tax, any kind of tax, a jumpstart tax, that we have to prove to the voters that we are spending and using the money wisely and efficiently and effectively. And that goes to whether it's our investment plan on homelessness, that I'm sure I'll have a question or two, police reform, business revitalization, et cetera. So I was born and raised in the city, and I've been very successful in business and law. And as you well know, I've been a council member for a number of years. And again, I will close my introductory remarks by saying I hope to be a great servant for you, a great partner with you, and look forward to really changing the narrative in Seattle. Seattle is not dying. Seattle will be thriving, and we will literally change the narrative. We will operate on principles of love and hope and compassion. We will bring the best out of people, not the worst. We will be louder than many because our message should be louder, because our message will be a vibrant Seattle, a peaceful Seattle, a unified Seattle. So we'll be louder, we'll be more organized, and I can't wait to get started if the voters are supportive to allow me to be their next mayor.
Well, thank you, Bruce, and we're so appreciative to have you with us here today. And so with your history on city council, as well as interim mayor, you're one of the candidates most intimately familiar with how all the different sides of the city of Seattle's government operates. So on that note, what do you plan to do in your first 100 days as mayor? What are the immediate actions that you will use your executive authority on? And what will be your first priorities in working with the city council?
Yeah. So I ask people to sort of look at the city as sort of a triangular structure with the mayor, the city council, and the department heads. Understanding that there's the municipal court system and the auditor's office and the hearing examiner, they're outside of that triangular in terms of jurisdictional authority. But I want to think about this triangle for a minute. And I think what we have now is the worst of all worlds. We don't have trust in these three groups. We don't have effective communication. We don't have a common plan. And so my first 100 days will be to make sure, number one, that I, as the mayor, that I am working feverishly to get the right people in this triangle, and that I set up the atmosphere by which trust is earned. You have to earn trust, and I have to earn their trust. And I have to hire the best, whether it's the best chief of police, the best human services director, and I could go down the line of these critical departments, the best SDOT director as an example. And I'm not insinuating that some of these department heads now are not the best. I am insinuating that there's a breakdown of communication, because I've worked with many of them. So the first 100 days are going to be absolutely critical in terms of our personnel decision. The other piece of that is we will do with the right personnel, we will do a very granular approach on, and I'll use small businesses as an example, at examining and explaining to the public the impediments that the city has put in the way in terms of their growth. Now, we all know about head taxes and the saga there and how the city has imposed a jumpstart tax and has done some things to find funding to fund many of these critical services. Homelessness is clearly the tail that's sort of wagging the dog in the discussion, and there's a close link to public safety. So what I will do is publish a plan, a measurable plan with outcomes. I will show the targets, and I will show areas where we are trying to improve such that people can evaluate, they could see it. And then we're going to change the narrative, tap into philanthropic dollars, and prove to the public that we have a date in mind, we have a plan, a published plan. And when I start raising money and raising awareness, and they could see how we are measuring, and our public safety strategies, hiring the best chief of police we can find, and changing the culture of the police department to, number one, trust has to be developed. Again, it has to be earned. So you're going to see some creative ways in which we're going to have a new discussion with our police department. I have police officers who, I had police officers at my kickoff because there are some really, really good police officers. But we will change the culture. We will imagine or reimagine where a gun and badge has to go. We will change the culture and completely have a transparent conversation that this country could see on what happens when you are trying to support the right officers. And that's how you change the culture. So within the 100 days, you're going to see a lot of talk about culture change, changing the narrative, and using technology. You're going to see a published plan on exactly what we're going to do. And you're going to see a complete transformation on personnel because I'm bringing in a lot of talent.
Well, thank you for that. In your interview with Publicola, you said that you wanted to be attentive to the needs of small businesses and the neighborhoods across Seattle, and that small businesses deserve a champion and a seat at the table. And just in your opening, you said you wanted to give a chance for, small, local, women-owned, LGBTQ plus owned and BIPOC-owned businesses to shine. How do we get the city to help those businesses shine, as you say?
I love that question, Matt. So here's a few things. Number one is we have to first look at what the city can control, and whether it's how we regulate businesses, how we help them or do not help them cross-market their services. I told a funny story a few weeks ago about how I think in the Seattle Times there's an article about the best pizza in the state, and it was way outside of Seattle, but they market it as the best pizza in the state. And my wife said, "Well, we got to taste that pizza." And so we drove out, and it was over an hour drive, and there were people all the way from Snohomish County there for this best pizza. And of course, they had sold out. They had been sold out since 5:00. We got there at 6:30. And it occurred to me that when you market small sort of businesses and what they're bringing to the community, jobs, hiring from the community, training, internships, apprenticeships, that when Ballard starts talking to Columbia City, starts talking to West Seattle, starts talking to the University District, and we start to build this ecosystem, which is the city's job to build, then great things happen. The other piece of this discussion is this. When I talk to Amazon or large businesses in e-commerce, we have to recognize in our country that our consumer habits have changed, right? And COVID exacerbated that. I believe that large companies that have done so well in e-commerce have a moral obligation to look at the small businesses, the brick and mortar institutions, and look at what they've done to this country, and they have an obligation to help us rebuild it and revitalize it. There are so many experiences that you cannot buy through e-commerce, and the field, the fabric, the culture of small businesses is clearly what makes a city great. And so my discussions with them will be that, okay, you have shown us how you can dominate the market in e-commerce, okay, we understand that. But now how can you be the best corporate citizens, the absolute best? And they may not have the answers. So it's the city's job, working with small businesses, to give them the answers. This is exactly how you can help. And I believe that coming out of, I'll use downtown as an example, coming out of COVID, downtown will never be the same. Now, Matt, not to call your age out, but I think I have a few more gray hairs than you. So I'm looking at a downtown that I've seen change many times. But this next time, when I look at the small business districts throughout the city and I look at downtown Seattle, it will never be the same. Many of these businesses that have been around 20, 30 years will not come back. So then the question becomes, as we do a visioning exercise and we call upon corporate resources to build the small business community, what will it look like? And I believe there will be childcare facilities. There will be a small business development. There will be attractions downtown, vibrancy, coupled with a very strong public safety plan. And that's the work I hope to do with GSBA to help me scope this. What should it look like? And I will use my bully pulpit to the e-commerce giants to say, you have an obligation to help us build this, because quite candidly, the same systems that allowed you all to do so well have allowed the devastation that we've seen. And we can't be shy about saying that. We have to acknowledge that the brick and mortar institutions are largely crumbling because of the effects of e-commerce.
And along that lines of, you've talked about supporting the small businesses in Seattle, hiring the right people. As mayor, as the head of the executive departments, including the Office for Economic Development, that department has been neglected by several generations of mayors and city councils. We know some of our peer cities like Portland invest tremendously higher amount of money into supporting their city's small businesses. Do you have any more specific plans that can go along with your business-to-business partnerships that you would like to see OED do under your leadership? Yes.
So number one, you are absolutely right that is part of the problem. OED's scope, breadth, their resources. And so you will see me grow that department coupled with the creation of another department. And the other department, closely aligned with OED, will be the Seattle Job Center. And in the Seattle Job Center, knowing that we can't replace LinkedIn or Indeed or any of the search engines out there, what we can do is build a network by which every available job in this city, and we have hundreds of thousands of jobs, are available and put in a portal. But more importantly, all of the available services and training and apprenticeships and interns that are offered out there are also linked with the particular job. So now people, whether they're young or middle-aged or mature, I think mature is a politically correct term now that I like using, that if they want to retool themselves, they can, and the kids coming out of school can. And so I think that's the city role, is to stimulate it. Now employers will be able to find employees, and employees will be able to find employers. So the Seattle Job Center is going to be closely aligned with the Office of Economic Development in this regard. The other piece of that, again, is I'll take Microsoft as an example. So they have a program called DigiGirls, where they are training young girls, knowing that they have a disparate impact on, well, I should say that the numbers are pretty poor in terms of in the world of technology. I think we all know that. And a lot of that is due to, I think, because of institutional practices and biases, and people are told what they should do in this world. And, I have a unique story there coming up in the city, the way I did it with parents who did not go to college. I had many people say I couldn't do something like this, but I had more people saying that I could. So what we're going to do in this sort of job center and the OED it's not a combined department. I do want to make that clear. We're going to find a way to tap into everyone's gifts and make sure that people can find sort of their calling. I talked earlier about using Seattle Channel as something we control, Channel 21. And most people, I say, how many people are watching? And hardly any hand goes up. And I say that I have to use that for a marketing tool for some of our most pressing needs. And whether it's how we are addressing homelessness or how we are supporting or not supporting small businesses, I want to be able to use that as a marketing tool. So you're going to see us, again, using some of the assets the city has to stimulate and support sustainable small businesses. The last piece, I'm sorry to be so long-winded on this, is that there are, access to capital is always an issue. And traditional banks sometimes are a little skittish on smaller entities. And so I incorporated an entity over 20 years ago called the Rainier Valley Community Development Fund, which is a community development financial institution. You're going to see the city of Seattle take a leadership role in making sure we have that consortium of community black block grant organization. Sorry, man, you have to cut some of this out because I've been talking all day. So sorry about that. Community development financial institutions, but a whole cadre of lending institutions to make sure small businesses have access to credit, because we know that's another impediment that they experience.
Well, that's fantastic. You kind of answered a whole bunch of other questions I had all queued up, so that's really great there. We've got time for one more question, and you did get to part of it just now. But as we're coming out of the pandemic, we're seeing that the creative economy in particular has suffered tremendously. But many people working in that industry don't feel that Seattle as a whole has ever invested enough resources in supporting the creative economy for some time. So what else can you do other than that? Access to capital is always at the top of the list. So that's a great part of that. But what else can you do to ensure that performers, creative entrepreneurs, cultural venues, and community-focused spaces are not only able to stay anchored in their existing communities, but also expand in our, ever-growing city?
That's a great question because, in addition to Seattle being a maritime and port city and a city of industry, and then transitioning into a high-tech and global tech and a biotech city, and, we have such a great hand here. We are also known for our creative community. We have stories that other cities would die for in terms of what has come out of our region, and sort of the I don't know if funkiness is still a word. I still use it in my house. Might be the only one. The funkiness of our, in a very positive way, what makes Seattle so special. So what we will do now, I got to put a plug in here that I'm chairman of the board of the Royal Esquire Club, which is the largest music venue for the African American community in Columbia City, and we also lease to the Royal Room, which showcases musicians, artists, poetry, etc. And for the last 5 years, I would say, I've served as chairman of the board and put a lot of energy into it because keeping this culture alive is just personal to me. A lot of people don't know this. I'm a former trumpet player. And so I have on my website, my father playing saxophone with Quincy Jones in the same band at Garfield. Because I just believe in artistic expression. So what will we do? Quite honestly, it's also an economic generator. So you're going to see, again, our use of our Channel 21 to evangelize this whole life. We'll make sure that from a regulatory standpoint, whether it's our admission sales or whatever we're doing that the community thinks we are not supporting, we will remove those impediments because we have to. We have to keep it alive. We have to be very intentional. Now, I'm not giving you intentionally the best answer, and that's very intentional on my part. Why? Because I have to go to the creative community. And I have to go to them and say, how can we help you? The answers are found in the community. And, I was the sole sponsor of the Race and Social Justice Initiative many years ago. And I emphasized that social justice, we know what the race issue is about. We're better understanding it. It's an ongoing battle that we must deal with. But the social justice piece has to do with not presuming you know all the answers, but going to the communities affected and bringing them into the conversation. So that's going to be my approach, whether I'm going to Capitol Hill or Lake City or wherever we can to create this vibrant, cool environment where we are supporting each other and making sure these companies realize the importance of it, the importance of artistic expression. And I could hold a note, by the way. I could sing a few bars, but we don't have time for that. But that's going to be what we're going to do. We're going to go on a listening tour, and then taking those policies back, we will implement them to support the creative community.
Well, that's a wonderful note to end on. That's all the time we've got. Thank you, Bruce, for joining us today. This has meant a lot to us, and good luck on your campaign.
Thank you very much, Matt. I enjoyed it.